Never a day off in the Big Ten. The Purdue Boilermakers come back to Mackey and drop one to Ohio State after leading by 16 points. We're going to talk about it all on Boilers in the Stands postgame show starting right now. Welcome back to the Boilers in the Stands post-game show. I am your host, Greg Braggs Jr. Alongside me, as always, is Joe Jackson, and Craig Bowers is underneath at Mackey Arena, waiting on Matt Painter and some of the players to talk to the press here, and we'll get some of their thoughts after the Boilermakers lose a tough one at home here, as they come back after, really starting out hot in Big Ten play in 2025. But as we know, this is what Big Ten play is all about in Ohio State, who's lost some close ones here recently, finally was able to get over the hump, and find a big win and a quad one win for themselves, as Purdue drops a quad two game. And as I said to open, a 16-point lead for the Purdue Boilermakers, but Braden Smith in foul trouble. I thought it was setting up for the game where you could give Purdue credit for, having to play a different way without Braden Smith playing 40 minutes because of that. And all of a sudden, Ohio State, Marcus Thornton hits a three to end the first half, and all of a sudden they catch fire to start the second half. And it took a minute for Purdue to try to find their way. And there was a lot of different mishaps, I feel like, at the very end of the game with some of the situational moments. And so now Purdue's just going to have to pick up the pieces as they look ahead to the Michigan Wolverines coming up on Friday night at Mackey Arena. But we're going to talk about this whole debacle here, here tonight at Mackey Arena. So Joe Jackson, I know you were there. I know you look frustrated. So and I also know that your mic might be muted, but you might have been doing that out of respect for me for once. But I didn't want you to have to put $5 in the jar. I know that's my job. So give us your instant reaction here to the tough loss here at home.
Yeah, like my instant reaction is Purdue's fine. Like you play this game again, I'm confident Purdue wins this probably more than they lose it. It just so happens to be the one of the times that they lose. Overarching concerns, there's probably only one or two that kind of popped for me, and we'll talk about those later. Ohio State shoots lights out in the second half. Like I still thought the defense was good in the second half. I think the biggest concern for me was how long it took Purdue to gain composure again in that second half when they got punched in the mouth. This is, especially in Mackey Arena by a team that's been through a lot, you just don't expect that. You don't expect them to look as frazzled as they did for as long as they did. And that's overall really my only major concern. Like we'll talk about the issues within this game. I don't think a lot of them are long-term issues for me. More just kind of a lot of micro things go against Purdue in a set of 40 minutes. That's how you lose a game like this. I think the bigger concern for like this is it makes it that much harder to now win the Big Ten. You have two losses. At Penn State at the time was not a bad loss. Penn State isn't like, if Purdue played Penn State again, I'm pretty confident they would beat them. But this Ohio State team is a team that isn't that good, truthfully. Like they have not played that well all year. This is a game you can't lose if you want to win the Big Ten title. And now really Michigan State and Wisconsin are really the only two teams that don't have a loss where it's like, hey, if you want to win the Big Ten title, you shouldn't lose that.
Yeah, and I think the other takeaway in this game is that Braden Smith is human. Like he's just played at an unbelievable rate here this year, but tonight was not a good showing, and he got in foul trouble early, and then in the second half he just looked out of sorts. He didn't look decisive with some of his shots. It seemed like he was pretty timid around the rim. He wasn't showing that same aggressiveness and confidence that you feel from him just watching it through the TV lens. And so, the foul trouble certainly, I think, played a big part in that, but that's something that Braden's going to have to adjust to. You're used to playing 40 minutes a game every night, and then now you've got to wait your turn tonight, and so that, I think, is something when you talk about how long it took them to wake back up in the second half to get back in the fight, that's something I think may be a learning experience for Braden, is when this situation arises again, he's got to find a way to get back into the fight faster. There was a few moments I felt like, Fletcher Lawyer really started to pull him out of it, in that between the 12 and 8 minute mark of the second half. I thought they responded well, but then, credit to Ohio State. They just all of a sudden turned into, a 3-point, it just turned into a 3-point rainmaker there, and you just some of them were extremely clutch baskets, really, too. I mean, you gotta tip your cap. Like you said, that's not always going to happen, but Michael Parrish, some of them step back threes, once he really got in a rhythm, it was like, look out. And, normally you would expect a guy like Thornton to set fire on you. That didn't necessarily happen, but like he did a good job of kind of chipping in different ways. Right. So, Ohio State is, in the standings, a bad team, and they've played poorly all year, but they're not a pushover team either. They have enough talent. They have enough talent to beat anyone in the Big Ten. So losing at Mackey is never good, but then if you really wanted to get into it, and, we're going to probably jump all over the place. We'll look big picture and things of that nature, but those last couple minutes, I mean, Robbie Hummel was talking about it on the telecast, the amount of times we have to go to a TV review, a booth review, just really stretches this out. And I just thought Purdue, while they did mount the comeback, which was good, that final 10 seconds wasn't great. So I'd be interested to hear your perspective on that, because, they had to foul twice to get into the bonus, to make Ohio State shoot free throws. At one point, they tried to go for a foul. It ends up, eating away 5 more seconds on the clock. Those are precious seconds to try to, have this go back and forth for a minute. And then the decision to try with 2.9 seconds to make the first one and then force the second miss. Personally, I was sitting there like, you don't have to force the miss on the second one here. Make it a 1-point game. Maybe you force a turnover, and then if not, you get a foul, send them back to the free throw line, force them to make that shot, and then you draw up a play if you get a miss to try to win the game at the end. It's all, you're scrambling at the end to try to get a Hail Mary, but I'm just curious because that's, you're going to run into that game in March, right? That's a lot of times what happens. You'll run into a team like this that gets hot, that shouldn't beat you. And how do you pull, a victory from the jaws of defeat, right? I just felt like situationally at the end, it wasn't exactly perfect.
Yeah, I think I'm cool with the missed free throw. I think with that much time, regardless of, with less than 3 seconds left, down 2 and 1 free throw, every scenario is a low win percentage in general. I don't know. I would have to go back and watch specifics to really, it gets hectic in Mackey Arena and you're into the game and stuff, but sure. I understand why they let the couple seconds go off, because they didn't want to foul Bruce Thornton, but probably with that little time left, you have to foul him and just live with the result from there. I do think that's one where, you get a few seconds back. Ohio State fouled up 3 fairly well. I should have waited on Braden a little bit, but regardless, they get the win. Yeah, I don't think it was great execution by any means, but it's just, you put yourself in that spot and, right, you're 10% win probability, probably less than that at that point, and you're playing with you're not even playing with fire. You're in the midst of the fire, basically, at that point, and it's tough to overcome. I don't know. I'm sure there are little things that they could have cleaned up too. Just maybe, I don't know, even down 2, you do go to TKR, which I don't mind because you get the bucket for sure. I guess at that point, it's still a minute and a half, so it's not too bad. But credit Ohio State for knocking down free throws as well. That was, except for the very, very last one. But I don't know. It just wasn't. The whole second half was just off. It was
definitely off. It was like a game of runs in the second half. You thought at one point that Purdue was really going to take advantage. They go up, I believe, 6, and they really had a chance to put it away and go up 8 there. And then the swing comes back. And then all of a sudden it turns into a 1-point game after a couple possessions, and it like flipped on its head. And, Ohio State did not back down. They've had some bad fortune here in some end of game situations. They should have beat Indiana, right at the end. Indiana blew it. Then they go to overtime. Indiana beats them in overtime. I think Northwestern maybe 2 at the very end of the game, or maybe I'm misreading that. But I know IU was one of those teams. They've had 3 games here that have come right down to the wire that they've blown into the Ducks as well, I believe. So they've been in these situations where Purdue, they really haven't, right? How many of these have come down to the very last second? They've had some pretty convincing victories here lately, but normally these are how all Purdue games end, right? Right at the end, and Purdue, we're used to Purdue executing properly. And I think the biggest X factor, as I said, was that, Braden just was off. Let's go into his individual stats for the game. We always normally skip over Braden because we take him for granted. So I hate that we're starting it this way, but this is the story of the game. Braden Smith goes 11 points, a lot of those on free throws at the end, but 3 of 14 shooting, 1 of 3 from 3. In 30 minutes of play, if I'm reading that correctly. So, 10 less minutes than he normally plays. He did have 8 assists. But and he gets the 2 fouls early on, and that keeps him out in the first half. And then he doesn't commit a foul in the second half, but it just didn't feel like he was in the game that much, Joe. And he was like trying to find his way in. He did force the turnover at one point. That was a big swing of momentum, but overall, as I said, Braden Smith's one of the best players in the country, but tonight Braden Smith showed he was human, and we were wondering if he was going to have a bad game all year. Well, here it was.
And that's why I'm not concerned or going to overreact to this game whatsoever. Braden Smith shoots normal. This game's fine. There's no other words than just he was bad shooting the ball. It wasn't that he was really taking bad shots. Maybe he forced 1 or 2, probably you could say, and I would agree with that. He missed shots we just see him make all the time, and it just right. It's not one, I don't have anything on my board Ohio State did this differently in the second half. I don't think they did. I don't think Ohio State played differently at all. The biggest thing was Ohio State made jumpers, Purdue didn't, and we'll still dive into some of the more of the stuff. But at the end of the day, that's sometimes the simplest. It's basketball. Sometimes shots go in or shots don't. The NBA, right? They call it a make or miss league, and it was a make or miss game for Purdue today. And that's not I don't want it to sound like there should be no blame or frustration from this game, because there absolutely should be. But at the same time, it's just you trust Braden Smith to make those shots, and you look right through the rest, because there's I know there's been some comments of why don't you get others involved and stuff like that. TK had 26 points on 11 of 16 shooting. Fletcher Lawyer had 15 points on 6 of 12 shooting. CJ Cox had 9 points on 4 of 6 shooting. Shakari Harris had 8 points on 2 of 2 shooting. It wasn't that others didn't get involved. It was simply Braden Smith had his worst shooting game in however long, and it just came all at once.
And really, we just talk so much about offense on this show, and we've tried here. I think I've made an effort to try to figure out defensive talk here on the program, because it really wasn't about offense tonight. It was about defense, and they let Ohio State get into it. That they're up 16 to end the first half. The game is over. Yep. But you know what? Jakari Harris to end the first half, it's a little thing, but he lets Thornton loose for 1 second, and Thornton had to hit a 3 all game. He knocks down a 3 to end the first half, and that little momentum, because then they get the ball to start the second half. He hits another 3, and it just started to build from there, and Purdue could not find their footing. And now Ohio State's getting into a rhythm. Now all of a sudden you're in a dogfight. And Purdue, as they always do, they responded. But now you're dealing with a locked and loaded Ohio State team where Purdue's outside of TKR, that trying to figure out who's going to take the ball. Fletcher certainly had some clutch drives to the rim, some really good decision making there where he wasn't forcing the 3, getting inside the paint, made some nice shots. But you didn't have Braden as your X factor here today. And so basically it was like almost like the Edie game, 2 years ago, where you're just throwing it into the big and you're just going to chip away. And, they weren't able to, make up for, the hot shooting that Ohio State had. And so I just think defensively, that was a big part of it. Now, you got to recognize that Micah Parrish. I thank you for the correction. Is on fire. Michael Parrish was somebody I went to elementary school with, so I keep saying that. But he was also a great shooter in his day. But Micah Parrish was on fire, and so if I had to be critical of Fletcher in those couple moments, they go ISO 1-on-1. You gotta make him put the ball on the ground and go to the rim, because Purdue does a great job of collapsing once you try to attack the rim, right? And then the ball is going to come out of your hand and it's going to kick around, make somebody else beat you. But he's already knocked down some big threes. And for me, in that moment, you could sense he was going to pull up on Fletch. And I'm not saying Fletch had terrible defense there. He certainly was there, but you got to get more in him to force him to put it on the ground and let him drive baseline.
Yeah, I agree. Especially at that point, you just don't want him to get any look, because that's who Ohio State almost wants to take tough shots. Like, that's what their offense is predicated on. And you see the difference between the first and the second half really, to me, it's simply they went in. And I do think, Thornton gets going right at the end of the first half. He drills the first one to start. And I don't know. Because it's just little things, right? Where, you probably aren't quite up on Micah Parrish enough. You let Bruce Thornton get a little bit free, and those things spiral, right? Because then you add that on top of Ohio State just hit some tough shots. They just did. They hit some very tough shots in this game, and that's who they are, and that's what they're going to do. And you compile that with Purdue, they just looked so out of sorts for the first 10, 12 minutes of that second half. That's how Ohio State gets back in the game. Missed some bunnies. Ohio State makes jumpers. It just kind of kept spiraling, and then Purdue eventually kind of gained their composure. Seems like I'm using mine speaking right now. But yeah, it just, little things just kind of spiral one to another, and that's how you lose a 16-point lead at home. And then you get into crunch time. You do a great job fighting back, but now this team is hot and they're rolling, and that's where they can hit it.
Well, and
Mobley hits a tough shot right at the end.
Mobley in the corner. I mean, he's a freshman, right? And you've got these other guys that were stepping up, making big plays. Now all of a sudden Mobley knocks one down. He's open, so it was a nice shot. He's right in front of his bench, but if you're Purdue, you're like, all right, everybody else has beat us. Let's see if you can hit this big time shot. And again, credit to him, he did. And honestly, Purdue, what was it? An 8-point game with 2 minutes to go, right?
Yeah.
And so when you talk about when I was trying to say that, it's kind of like a March scenario there where now you're scrambling to try to save your life. I thought they did a good job to get it to that moment, to force Ohio State to have to win the game. In most instances, you're up 8 with 2 minutes to go, it's over. But Purdue and Matt Painter, they're good at not letting go of the rope. Even all the way down to 10 seconds, you could see Matt Painter licking his lips, trying to figure out how he can find his way back into the game. Ohio State had the turnover at one point where they tried to throw it to the other side of the court. They had a couple turnovers in that 2-minute stretch that almost let Purdue back in it. But ultimately, you're tripping away with twos from Kraig Kaufman-Renn. You needed a 3 at some point in that sequence, and they just weren't able to find that. So they also weren't able to get an and one. This was a pretty physical game. It felt like a lot of guys hitting the deck, a lot of physicality underneath. I know the fans there were getting pretty frustrated with the refs as well. This is not a ref show where we blame the refereeing, but it was certainly a physical game. They were letting that go both ways. No question about that as well. So Purdue falls. I know everybody's trying to figure out what the exact final score was. That's why I didn't say it in the cold open, because I was like, they kept switching it from what was a 3 to a 2, and then the final shot. So I didn't even
73 to 70.
73 to 70, as there was a heave-ho to try to tie it at the end from Fletcher Lawyer. Purdue falls to Ohio State at Mackey Arena, as Purdue now takes another loss here in the Big Ten, and Michigan State starts to get a little bit more distance between first and second and third, with some of the teams trying to get up to their spot. So appreciate everybody tuning in here tonight. Tough loss for Purdue, but we're always here for you on Boilers in the Stands. Please hit that like button while you're hanging out. Kraig Bowers should be joining us here in just a little bit as he's trying to hear from Matt Painter and some of those guys. So when he jumps in, we'll get some of his insights from the podium down at Mackey Arena. But let's I don't know where you want to take this. If you want to go into the minutes with Braden having the foul trouble, I think maybe that would be interesting to see what Matt Painter adjusted to not having his star point guard there. I know somebody mentioned in the chat that they thought one of the bigger things that hasn't gone said yet here so far is that CJ Cox didn't start the second half. So he felt that that was something that might have made a difference, to start the second half as far as defensively. So let's get into the minutes, and see kind of how this all broke down. And you take it from here, Joe.
Yeah, so everybody watching on YouTube, color box means that player played that minute. You can see the positions, I believe, down at the bottom. I didn't cut them off. Purdue margin, what that lineup was, plus minus during their minutes. I would say the last 3 minutes, Harris maybe could have got another minute or two, just the way that it goes, offense, defense. But yeah, you see in that first half, right, where you kind of alternate between Smith and CJ, and honestly, Painter did a fantastic job of it, of getting Braden in on offense possessions and taking him out for defense possessions, basically limiting the opportunity that Braden had to pick up foul number 3 while still maximizing what he can do offensively and not completely taking him out of the game. So honestly, I thought Painter did a fantastic job with that. I think the biggest kind of, I don't know if side effect's the right word, because Lawyer played solid, but Lawyer plays 40 minutes. He's not a guy that'll play 40 minutes. He usually gets, anywhere from a 4 to 8 minute break in the first half, maybe 1 or 2 in the second half, but he plays all 40 in this one. You can see, right, the bench definitely tightened this game. Wasn't the Colvin game. Heidi gets some minutes, and then Jakari gets a lot of minutes off the bench. So, I truly do think Painter did a good job in that first half managing Braden's fouls. He managed the 2 fouls while still not completely taking Braden out of the game. Plus, Purdue goes on kind of a run there, and that also, I think it's easier to keep your superstar off the floor when the lead is increasing rather than when the lead is decreasing, as it was this game where it was increasing. So, and then second half, right, you play your dudes. And I think CJ didn't start because of 3 fouls, but I'm not certain of that. I know he did have 3 fouls to start that half. Jakari also had been playing great, so maybe just trying to keep that going. But that's really the only big thing in the second half. CJ doesn't start, but obviously he still plays the minutes.
Yeah, David Dillman here in the chat agrees with you, saying Harris was playing really well. CJ Cox having foul trouble. That's all that was, with Harris getting the start in the second half. And Jakari Harris did play very well. It just seems like he's really starting to get comfortable. He hit a couple big threes. There was that one sequence where Kaufman-Renn, kept the ball alive, and that was just a total hustle moment for Purdue. And then all of a sudden it's kicks out to Braden. Braden kicks to the corner, and Jakari knocks down the 3. And that was right at the end of the first half. And you felt like that was like a dagger shot as Ohio State was trying to get back in it. And then I think that pushed the lead to 16. And then all of a sudden the game flipped on its head from there. So there was some interesting things, I think, to take away in the second half at one point, because David Dillman, just to bring back another comment that I started, because, I felt like, Purdue has played so well defensively. They end up giving up, like you said, 73 points tonight. But as David Dillman says, positive take in his opinion, defense still looked good after they forced 18 turnovers on the game. So, that's an interesting perspective to take from, because I'm looking at it from the make or miss perspective, but Purdue certainly, statistically certainly was still, causing, disruption in the passing lanes.
This is right. We've talked about Purdue's defense being revamped, and there is a new style. There's a new energy. This is I will go to the side effect word here. This is a side effect of the Purdue's defense. And I've mentioned it briefly kind of throughout the last few games of hey, they force more threes. teams just haven't made the tough threes. And Ohio State did that specifically in the second half, right? Ohio State takes more threes than twos in this game by 1. That is part of what Purdue's defense is going to want to do from here on out. And so I think the biggest thing going forward is Purdue needs to be better at being able to withstand those runs. This is not going to be the last time that a team gets super hot, just especially given how Purdue plays defensively. They just have to be able to withstand it. And obviously they did not do that for 12 plus minutes of the second half. But yeah, I mean, defense still forcing 18 turnovers. The defense has been so good at that. They're up to 89th in the country in terms of defensive turnover percentage, number 1 in the Big Ten during Big Ten play, forcing turnovers on about 22% of opponents' possessions. So like, there are definitely still the positives to take away. I don't know. I guess
like
I want to find like more things to pick at, but I just keep coming back.
I think I might have found it because, a few games ago, Purdue knocks down 19 threes, right? Was that for who'd they do that against? That was Nebraska at home, correct? 19 threes, and they were on fire. Since then, these last 3 games, it seems like teams are trying to take that away. Certainly tonight, they only make 3-pointers on the game, but they only took 9. When they hit 19 threes, how many threes they take that game? Probably 35.
Or something like that.
You know what I mean? Like, so that they're not. You can't say they're not taking them. They're being chased off of them, right? Fletcher Lawyer goes 0 for 2 from 3. Braden goes 1 for 3. So like they didn't even really have an opportunity. I thought Braden in a game where he's hotter and more confident, I thought there was a few times that he came around to pick that those are normally games that he pulls up and tries to knock down the 3. He tried it a couple times. They weren't going down the well. So I felt like he was holstering them and trying to be, find his baskets or find the passing a different way. But Fletcher, like I said, 0 for 2, he just couldn't find daylight.
Yeah, I think credit to Ohio State for this. And when I rewatch, I'll know more of how right or wrong this next statement is. But I think their defensive game plan coming into this was to try to limit threes, try to turn it more into a Braden TKR game. And you see Braden TKR combined for 30 shots, which isn't a thing at all. I agree that there was a couple times where it's just Braden, just pull it, just shoot that. I don't I'm not too concerned with Braden missing open threes because I think that they're long-term going to fall.
Yeah, he just didn't look engaged. He didn't look engaged. So I'm not saying, he
didn't have the killer to him.
Yeah, he looked off tonight. And so I think probably he recognized that, and that's why he was like, I'm not going to take this because I don't feel right. I mean, even at one point, he made a nice move inside where he got a guy up in the air, pivoted, and normally he goes right off the backboard, and he missed it. And that's to me somebody that's just not. He's just off. His whole equilibrium is off because he just alligator armed it, right? And Braden has just played so loose and so aggressive and so confident. And today it felt timid, it just did. It looked timid. And so, and so again, playing 40 minutes a night, we talked earlier in the season, hey, is this a problem from a fatigue factor? Not at all. But now I think the one thing we're looking at here is, all right, when this situation arises, he's got to find a way to mentally stay in it, or find a way once he gets back into the game to get back into it, and find that juice, find that rhythm, find that momentum, because he just wasn't able to. But again, he's human, he's going to have a bad game. He wasn't going to, go the whole season without having one. Now, what I was hoping for, the thing that was disappointing, was I was sitting here going, all right, this is the first game where Braden's not going to get a high minute volume. And let's see CJ Cox and Jakari Harris and Trey Kaufman-Renn win this game without Braden Smith, right? And they had that opportunity even at the end, if they would have been able to steal the game, we certainly would have highlighted that it got messy, but we could have credited them. Now, it goes one way or the other. Ohio State wins, so now we got to be a little more critical to it. But there was an opportunity there. If we want, we can gloom and doom the entire show. But I also just thought in the first half, when Braden came out and they extended the lead without him, Like if I'm Matt Painter, I'm showing these guys that in the film room, like, hey, you guys, this is what we need when Brayton, because those situations are going to happen again. So you just got to be ready for it. I thought they were, and really it was just about Braden adjusting from, his minutes being a little different, honestly.
Yeah, and that's like, again, I just, he's gonna make those shots, and I don't know. I don't, like, in my head, you keep giving the ball to Braden because he is arguably the best point guard in the entire country, and you live with him taking those open shots because he has hit them time and time again, and you live with him running pick and roll after pick and roll because TKR went 11 of 16 from the field and was really good on the short roll. Like, if the process felt worse, I would feel worse about this game, but not that there's nothing to improve on. And I do think a couple times, right? Like they probably could have kicked out to three that maybe they just were a little bit focused in on the 2-man game more, but I don't know. I don't know. Offensively, especially, like, I just think you live with the process, and obviously the results just didn't show.
Yeah, for sure. And so, Trey Kaufman-Renn, I think, did everything he could to try to stay in it. What did Caleb First end with, too? Because I think that's the other part. He's certainly been an X factor in their 7-game winning streak. And tonight, 0 points on 0-2 shooting, 1 offensive rebound, 2 defensive rebounds, 2 fouls, in 25 minutes of play. So that's the other aspect too, right there. I mean, there's, he does some different things, being able to switch on the perimeter and rebounding. I thought there was times tonight where rebounding was an issue, trying to get in there. If we look at what the team stats were for rebounds on the game, I don't know if that's going to back me up on what I'm trying to say here, but it just felt that way. Total rebounds on the game, 28 for Ohio State, only 26 for Purdue. So they get out rebounded, but not by much, but just not, it just didn't feel like, it obviously wasn't Caleb First's best game as well. And I think that was a big part of it too, is he's been playing so well through this winning streak. So now 2 of your starters, Caleb and Braden, have a tough night. So Caleb, will look to bounce back here against Michigan.
Yeah. I mean, on top of that, and this I think relates to First a little bit, is both of his shots came at the rim. Purdue was 5 of 12 at the rim. I can look up what they're shooting on the year and get that in just a sec. 5 of 12 at the rim is a poor shooting night at the rim. And right, not that teams should go 100% at the rim, but right, you expect that to be a little bit better than what it was. As I'm kind of just stalling right now and trying to get the stats up, and here it is. Purdue on the season 66% at the rim, and they're 5 of 12, which is like what, 46% or something like that.
What were they around the rim last year? I know it's easy, but it's just funny to think about 66% around the rim when we're used to Zach Edey being 86% around the rim. So we're coming back to reality with life inside the paint in the Big
Purdue
10.
was 66% at the rim last year too.
No way. How is that even possible?
I don't know.
That's crazy.
They're taking fewer shots at the rim. Is this right? Yeah, this is just, yeah. I would have been in your camp. I would have just assumed.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
Well, regardless, the more you know. Those silly numbers, you never know what they're going to tell you. But it's, so I don't know what that means then. But from your vantage point, I, like you said, 5 of 12 around the rim tonight. That's not going to get it done. You can't, especially when you only got 3 threes. Where are you getting your points? Everything from the free throw line. You can't depend on that forever.
Yeah, and so, like, I that's where I'm getting at. I think, like, my summary for this game is the actual in-game process standpoints. Like, there are little things to clean up. Absolutely, you don't lose Bruce Thorne. And let him get a look on the perimeter. Maybe you do try to force 1 or 2 more threes. Like, there are the little things, but I think overall, it's like, hey, process was good, just simply shots didn't fall. I do think the one thing that stands out, though, and I'll come back to it, is like, you cannot get punched in the mouth and be frazzled for that long. It's against Ohio State. This is game 20 of the year. There's still 11 more regular season games. Sky isn't falling. Far from that. Purdue's good. That's not a concern. You can bounce back from this, but in what I think Selection Sunday's in like 55 days. So March Madness starts in 60 days, we'll say. In 60 days, you have to be able to bounce back, or else your season's done, right? Like right now, you can bounce back from Ohio State next game, and if Purdue beats Michigan, right, this Ohio State game will just be a little bit of a blip, and it's not a big deal. In 60 days, though, it matters way more. And Purdue, right, this is really the first time since A&M where it was kind of a close back and forth game. It felt like, I know Oregon was I guess Oregon sort of was. It starts with Braden Smith, and it's just the mental stuff of just, like it looked like he was like thinking out there, if that makes sense.
100%.
When Braden Smith plays, he has this free flow ability of just dissecting defenses and getting to his shots, and it just wasn't there. It wasn't there this game. And if that's there, I think Purdue wins this.
Well, and I agree. He was thinking, and I think he was thinking, I'm not feeling it, so I better figure something else out. I better navigate a little more and make sure I'm taking the highest percentage shot I can and make sure I try to find the highest percentage pass I can. I mean, he really wasn't even doing too much where, he's navigating kind of around the paint in between the 3-point line where he does like that little drop down to TKR. He really wasn't doing it that much. I mean, they were literally just going 2 years ago offense where go to the elbow, throw it into TKR and let him battle his way all the way to the rim. And to TKR's credit, he really did everything he could to try to win him that game. But that's a hard way to win. You're just chipping away, and the other you're trading twos for threes, and that's the math ain't gonna math when you're trying to do it that way. So, it's and then I just think the other aspect too is, when you're like you said, this free flowing confidence, energy guy like Braden, and the way you play is to just kind of find your way. And well, when you get up 5, 6, 7, 8 points, it's easier to do that. But then when the game starts to tighten up, the pressure, especially at the end, it gets a little tighter. You're not having your best game. So that can throw you off a little bit too. Braden is obviously one of the more clutch players. And even today, like, I know he ended up with 11 points. At one point, he hit that knockdown right off the elbow from the free throw line. Like, that was a big shot in that moment, and he's not having a good game, but he's still able to take that shot and knock it down. So, we're certainly not having a Braden Smith bash session here, but he had a bad game today. It happens.
When you were Braden Smith and I come on here, I'm like, hey, there might not be a better point guard in the country, right? Like, you do get held to a different standard. And I think that's where our critique and comments come from, is like, Braden Smith is and should be held to a different standard. And so that's where that's coming from. It's not like obviously we're hating on Braden or anything. It's simply when you are that good, when you are potentially an All-American type player, you're the leader of the team, you get held to a different standard, and he did not meet that standard today. And it wasn't the only reason by any means that Purdue lost, but probably the easiest one to point at.
Yeah, it kind of snuck up on him, right? I mean, you're up 14 at the half, 16 points at one point, and then all of a sudden, this game flips on its head, and now you're scrambling. I thought Ohio State's coach did a really nice job of calling timeouts in moments where Purdue was starting to get that momentum. Crowd starting to get into it. Fletcher's trying to get the crowd into it. Then there was it was either under 12 or under 8 minute timeout, like right at the worst time for Purdue, because you felt like they were about to blow the top off there. So those are a couple little nuanced things. It's no excuse for Purdue, but at the same time, like, sometimes those momentum stoppers can happen at the worst times. And so they certainly did here today for Purdue. But ultimately, like I said, they were up 6 at one point. I'd have to, one of these days, I swear, I promise you guys, I'm going to take notes, because I always there's always these moments, and you'd think I'd write it down and you'd think I'd be prepared for you fine people, but I just lean so heavily on Joe and Kraig, and then I, fail you guys by not having these notes. But there was a moment with about 8 minutes, 7 minutes to go where they're up 6 and they have the ball and have an opportunity to end it right there, and they didn't, and it comes back the other way. And Ohio State goes on their final run to, take the lead. And to your point of Purdue can't let Ohio State go on a run that long on the telecast. And I don't know if you were able to see any kind of the broadcast view on the telecast. They said it was at one point, not from a point standard, It was the longest run minutes wise of the year that Ohio State went on, where Purdue went scoreless. That's another thing about the broadcast that I thought was interesting. I don't know what the heck is going on with Peacock's, broadcast, but when they did the reviews at the end and they were trying to figure out on the one where Braden Smith tipped the ball out and they were reviewing to see if it went off Ohio State's fingertips last. Well, on the broadcast on Peacock, they only had the wide shot from press row. Like they didn't have another angle of it, but yet they spent like 9 minutes trying to figure it out from they didn't have like a baseline view of this. And so then I don't know what the refs were looking at, but then at one point they asked Robbie Hummel and Noah Eagle if they can look at their monitor to see if they can overturn it. And I'm sitting here like, this is not a good enough view. You're not going to overturn it. Get on with the game. Like, then they ended up turning it over anyway because the guy's shuffling his feet. I don't even know if that was the right call because, like, he said he was moving in the box, but I thought you were able to, like, it wasn't like he was running up and down the baseline. That whole sequence there was just bizarre.
Well, and that was, I don't actually, Purdue scored after it, but that was like, they tipped the inbound pass. I think we're going to have a layup. And then it got waved off because, like, the inbounder traveled or whatever. Or right. I don't. Isaiah Walker would know the specific term. I think it's like you can't travel on an inbounds, but whatever the rule that he broke that they called. It was a weird ending. Like I'm not blaming right. You're up 16 at home. I don't care about refs. You should win that game.
No, and I'm not even talking about the refs there.
No, I know you aren't either.
Yeah, no, and I'm just talking about
flow.
Right. Oh, the last 2 minutes was like a whole nother game. It was ridiculous. Yeah. And like I said, just from a review standpoint, if we're going to do TV reviews over every little call with 2 minutes to go and it's on Peacock, well, I need more than the one camera angle you have. Like this is NBC here. How do we only have one camera view? Big Ten, if it happens on the Big Ten network, there's like 9 different angles they look at it from. So that whole thing was just like weird to me.
Yeah. I mean, I don't got much to add to that just because
that's it. Yeah. You didn't get to see it on the broadcast.
You had to talk about Bears head coach or something and not come to Mackey once again because some are saying you're ducking Mackey.
I got lucky tonight, right? Because like seriously, I haven't been to Mackey this year. I would have been. It's negative 20 out, and yes, the Bears just hired Ben Johnson. I know somebody in our chat was giving a shout to that, and so I'm like extreme. We got a million things going on there. Ben Johnson's going to be introduced at Hallis Hall tomorrow, so I just had to shelf it for tonight. And yes, if I had gone out there in negative 20 and they lost this game, I would have cried all the way home. So maybe I dodged a bullet, but I swear to God, Joe, from my cold dead hands, will you have to keep me from Mackey Arena on Friday night when they take on the Michigan Wolverines? And now I feel good about it now because they're going to bounce back. I feel good about that. Boilers will bounce back. Braden's not going to play like this. That's not his game. So exactly. Can't win them all as Tariq is saying here. So I don't know if Kraig is planning on joining us here. If he is, he can give us some insight. Maybe we can shoot him a text, whatever. But we can I don't know where else you'd like to take this from, an individual play standpoint. I don't know where somebody asked in the chat where they've dropped from Ken Palm. Everybody's always
they really,
I was. Yeah, so wherever you want to take this, I'll shoot Kraig a text if you haven't to see if he's coming on to see what Painter had to say for himself. If he apologized.
I would just say this is a game you should have won. I don't think Ohio State's a bad matchup for Purdue whatsoever. Purdue is more talented across the board, but Ohio State is a team that can get hot shooting, and that's exactly what happened. On a positive note. And it was not a perfect game for him, Jakari Harris. And there's a reason why. Oh, I see Kraig right now. There's a reason why he got pulled, and it was a couple of off-ball defensive issues. But this is probably Jakari's best game on the season. And he knocks down 2 threes. Aside from he had like the 2 bad off-ball defensive mistakes, which cannot be overlooked. But knocks down 2 threes. Aggressive defense. I thought he was really good. Had a couple good drives. So like that is a positive that, if he can start getting going, CJ, he had 9 points. Like you can start getting these production from these freshmen. That'll be kind of the one main positive that I kind of have from this going forward that I will take is that, hey, you're really starting to see these freshmen start to contribute, especially, Heidi and Colvin continue to no-show, at least offensively. Harrison might be able to kind of step up in certain games and give them the sparks that they need. And it might not have to be just CJ going forward. It could in some games be Jakari as well. So that'll be, kind of the one main positive I have taken away from this. Obviously, everybody knows I've been high on Jakari Harris, even when he was shooting the ball poorly to start the year. 7 of 16 in Big Ten play, which is 44%, super small sample size, but shots are starting to fall down. I think the other thing is that, like, you look at his free throw percentage, and he has shot the ball really well from the free throw line. Again, small volume, but I think that leads to a good long term. I think he's going to be a good 3-point shooter.
Right.
So yeah, that's my biggest positive from this game.
The positive duos is CJ and Jakari, like that, and I think we continue to see that because they're like the combo guards, right? Like the two freshmen, you're going to combine their success with each other. They're always going to be tied, just like the freshman class a few years ago with Edie and Ivy and Brandon Newman and those guys. As I'm now by myself, and that's okay. I will survive. But I think the other aspect too is just trying to figure out how you get involved, how you get Camden Heide and Miles Colvin into the game. Like, I think that's the other aspect as well. Like when we talk about Jakari and CJ being that dynamic freshman duo and the positives that we see from them and the allowance for growing pains. Well, Camden Heide and Miles Colvin, that they, both had no points on the game, and trying to figure out how to get them into it. As you said, when you look at the scoring disparity of different guys, you're not overly complaining about this, but I'm sure they want to get involved in the game as well, and just trying to figure out how they can do that with the minutes that they have. Camden Heide plays 15 minutes and has no points. Miles only plays 8, so it's a little more understandable, but also, no points, 1 rebound. So, from your standpoint, Joe, how can we get them more involved here?
They're in such tough spots where they rely offensively almost completely on others being able to create for them and be catch and shoot type guys, attack closeouts, things like that. And those looks just haven't been there. I think you've seen the past few games where, teams really just want to stay at home and they kind of live with the 2-2 game with Braden Smith and TKR. And right, that's where, like, I know, and when I watch, when I rewatch, I'll have a better answer. And so I'm going to throw the caveat, like, I could be completely wrong with this next statement, but from what I saw and what I remember, like, right, you can try and force threes. And I know that's been a topic in the comments. You only put up 9 threes. Like, how can that happen? And there probably is some validity to it, but at the same time, right, like, this is reading back to Heide and Colvin, I promise. At the same time, though, like, if Braden Smith and TKR are going to get 2-on-2, why do you not just run that every single time? That's your best action. That's your 2 best players. And so it becomes tough for guys like Heide and Colvin to really get those looks because they're relying on everybody else to create for them. And now teams are staying at home and teams are making more of a 2-on-2 game. And that's your 2 best players if you're Purdue. So you just kind of keep going to it because it's gotten you this far.
Well, and when you get Ohio State to have 18 turnovers, you force 18 turnovers on the game. Well, I guess then my question is how many of those were dead ball turnovers as opposed to turnovers that turn into transition points that can open up an opportunity for Camden Heide or Miles Colvin to knock down an open 3?
I can answer
dead
that.
Ball turnovers.
What's that, Joe?
13 dead ball turnovers.
Right. So, turnovers are good, but the ones where you can keep the ball alive and go the other way, those sometimes can turn into, easy buckets. As Kraig Bowers joins the Boilers in the Stands post-game show, he gave me about 5 different facial expressions as he joined.
We scored 30 points off turnovers tonight, and we were plus 24 in points off turnovers. Like, we did fine generating points off of those turnovers.
And that's not what, and I wasn't saying that. We were talking about Miles Colvin and Camden Heide. Like, how can they get more involved in the offense? Camden ends with 15 minutes, 0 points. Miles, 8 minutes, 0 points. You're not really drawing up offense for them. And talking to Joe about how can they find a way to get them involved. And I was just saying, well, sometimes when you run into a transition three, that's one of the ways. So certainly to your point, they were getting points off turnovers. Kaufman-Renn, I think, had a fantastic effort tonight. But those guys just weren't able to contribute. But Kraig, you were underneath. You were able to talk to Matt Painter. I'm not sure which players spoke to the media, but curious to hear what you heard from those guys. Along with your instant reaction, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I think just first instant reaction of this game is just what a strange loss it is, right? Purdue does, like I just said, plus 24 points off turnovers, plus 16 points in the paint, plus 3 in second chance points, plus 7 in the turnover margin, plus 3 in offensive rebounds. Like, Purdue doesn't lose games when they win those categories. They just don't. So it was just a really, really strange loss. And at the end of the day, Ohio State's 3-point shooting negated that. But you just say, well, where did that come from? How did that happen? And one of the things that Painter said, and that I wrote down real big letters before we went into the press conference, was, Purdue just didn't match Ohio State's energy in that second half. They were the energy team in the first half. And it's like, I don't know, man. I don't know if they came out just thinking like this is in the bag and like we're doing what we want. Heck, we did what we want without Braden Smith even being on the floor. And it just, the energy wasn't there in the first 10 minutes of that second half. And that first 10 minutes of the second half is probably the worst defensive stretch they've had in the last 8 games. And then the second half in general related to defense, right? They give up 45 points alone in that second half. And so, I mean, I think that's a lot of it. And, in reference to, you can't, I almost called Joe Ken for some reason, but in reference to what Joe was talking about with that 2-man game with Braden and TKR, somebody asked a question like about getting others involved and getting more threes up. And, he said, I keep telling you guys, like, if teams are going to defend us the way Ohio State defends us, we're going to repeatedly go to that 2-man game over and over again because that's the best play and that's our best opportunity at generating offense. He did think they dribbled the ball a little bit too much in that second half and that they got a little too deep in the paint before trying to decide what to do with it in terms of trying to get it to TK. But I was like, you look at TK's game and he finishes with 24 points today, right? 26. And shoots a good percentage, 26. But those points seem to come real streaky, right? Like him and Braden had it going, and when Braden was in there in the first half, he racks up a bunch, and then like we don't really get it to him when Braden's out because we don't have the same type of facilitator to run the play that works so well. And then in the second half, it never felt like they got into that rhythm that they had in the first half. And then he scores 8 points down the stretch at the end of the game. And I think when Braden went out, he had 14 maybe. So like 22 of those 26 kind of came in these odd spurts. And then like we just weren't getting to it for the first 10, 15 minutes of that second half, and in the right ways anyway.
Yeah, I completely agree. It was a streaky game, and I think Braden Smith's foul trouble was a big cause of that, where it felt like a wonky type of run, different runs, different feel. And I think that threw Braden Smith off his game here tonight. Did Matt Painter talk anything about that? Because he just looked timid. He didn't look like, there were times where he's coming around a pick and he, can't, like he wasn't pulling the trigger. Felt like there was a little bit of indecisiveness, like you said, getting deep towards the rim before deciding what he wants to do. Then that one time he gets this guy up in the air, nice pivot towards the hoop, and he alligator arms it and misses the bunny at the end. Like it just felt, obviously it was Braden's worst game statistically, but just visually watching it, on the broadcast, he just looked off. He looked timid.
Yeah, and I don't know so much that he was timid as, in the first half he was cooking while he was in there. And in terms of getting the ball to TKR in position to score, didn't shoot well all night. Diebler did say in the press conference that they switched how they were defending that pick and roll. If Joe was here, he could probably tell us exactly what they did to switch on that pick and roll. But I mean, when the question was asked, just like, what did you do to slow him down? He's like, well, we completely changed the way we were defending it. So I think that just made it more difficult for Braden to get.
Well, Robbie said that on the telecast. Sorry to cut you off, but he said they were blowing it up. You know, it was the way Robbie described it.
Yeah.
Joe probably could explain it, but I think it like when we first started the program, like if you go back and watch the beginning, like I haven't seen Joe this mad in a while. I don't know what it was like sitting next to him, but he was pissed off when we first started. You could like see it on his face. So I know he wants to get back to grinding the tape on this game because like as we've been talking about it, it kind of feels like we're all kind of like, what the heck just happened here?
Yeah. No doubt. And like I mean, regardless of, I guess, how Purdue shot from outside or didn't necessarily get a bunch of threes or anything else, if they just come out with the same type of energy in that second half from a defensive standpoint, you know, because one of the things Painter talked about in that press conference is this Ohio State team outside of Thornton, this Ohio State team has streaky shooters, and Parrish is one of those streaky shooters. But you let him see two go in, he's going to keep hunting that shot. Yep. And you know, he said Fletcher had to disrupt him, that Fletcher was there defensively, like he was in position, but he wasn't actually disrupting him, and Parrish was just giving a jab step and shooting right over him and getting whatever he wanted. And he, you know, kind of let him heat up. And one of the other things he talked about was the end of half three from Thornton, that was just a complete blown assignment in terms of how they were supposed to cover it. So he gets that three, and then just bad luck, Jakari falls down to start the second half, and then all of a sudden it's a 10-point game, right? And the whole game feels different right away. But it's like Ohio State seized on that, and Purdue didn't like respond. And they missed a few shots. Painter was still happy with the looks they were getting in that stretch. Just felt like they missed ones that they normally hit, and a lot of that, you know, some of that was Braden missing layups, and Purdue missed a lot of shots close to the rim tonight.
Yep.
And
5 of 12.
Never going to blame it on like everybody's got to travel, right? But we're going through it for the very first time. So they go out on that West Coast trip. They're there from Tuesday, probably don't get back till Sunday, right? And then have walkthrough practice yesterday, and then turn around and play today. We heard Mick Cronin talk about this. Doesn't do any good. Painter didn't whine about it or anything like that. Like he didn't go on some long diatribe whining about how the schedule.
Kraig's about to Mick Cronin whine about the travel.
No, I'm not. Like it's just part of it. But like I do think it takes some getting adjusted to a degree.
For sure.
Having that type of schedule, and they talk about that in the NBA too, and that's why they kind of do weird things in the NBA around rotations and everything else to make sure guys are fresh.
Yeah, for sure. It's certainly going to be an adjustment for the Big Ten, you know, all the way across the board. First year doing the West Coast trips like this now. So, you know, certainly probably played a part in this, as Purdue's got 2 more home games coming up with Michigan on Friday, and then IU next week. IU takes on Northwestern at Welsh Ryan Arena tomorrow night. So we'll have to see how those guys fare. But it is interesting, and I'm glad that Painter talked about that end of first half three where Jakari loses his guy. I'm glad that he talked about the 2 threes by Parrish where Fletcher Lawyer's got a hand in his face, because those are 2 things that we brought up in the first segment of the show that were big moments in the game. And I agree with Matt and to you, Kraig, where you gotta make him put the ball on the ground. You gotta make him go baseline. Then you collapse the defense, let him kick it around the horn, and find somebody else to knock it down a shot. If the freshman hits an open shot in the corner, fine. But this guy's heating up, and you got to recognize that in that moment. And you could tell that he was gearing up to put it up on him, and he did 2 times in a row. So first time, okay, maybe I can let it go. But then the second time he does a step back 3 on you, like that's on you, you know. So to me, you know, I think that was probably the biggest moments in the game. I don't know what's happening to Joe. Is Joe okay?
Somebody's talking to him right now. So
all right.
Joe's okay. He's still alive. But did you guys? I want Joe on to answer this, whether you guys talked about it or not. But
well, let's go into some of the starred comments while Joe's signing autographs here.
Yeah.
We love Joe, but I want to address this first, of course. Our guy, Tariq. I keep saying Tariq. Tariq. I always say Tariq.
I do
And
too.
he's been a loyal viewer of our program for 3 years, and Kraig is the only one that consistently gets his name right because Kraig's smart and I'm a dumbass. But you know that I love you, Tariq, and one of these days I'm not going to butcher your name on this show, but we appreciate you, Tariq. And he also adds OSU is 30th in KenPom. Not a horrible loss, but not a good loss. LOL.
Yeah, I think right. It's not a horrible loss in terms of tournament seeding, anything like that. Metrics wise, like I think the metrics represent Ohio State to be better than who they are, but at the same time, the metrics are where they are. I don't think it hurts Purdue too much there. The biggest thing is just going to be if Purdue loses the big share of the Big Ten title by a game, you're looking at this game as the one like, hey, that's the one we should have got.
Yeah, and I mean, I think every team's going to have one of those throughout the season, right? Like you always have that one.
That doesn't is MSU right now.
Right, but I'm saying,
yeah,
chances are they're going to catch one of those two. And I had somebody push back on me and be like, Penn State was a terrible loss too, and I'm like, and I'm like, neither you or I felt good about that game going into it, Joe. Like Purdue at Penn State. I mean, that road games change everything in terms of what's a good loss or a bad loss, yada yada yada. But I would also say
Purdue over Penn State right now. By the way, if they played again on the road, I'm picking Purdue.
Painter would kind of push back on your assessment of Ohio State based on what he said in the comments at post game too, though, Joe, because he said he kind of emphatically told his team 3 possessions, and this Ohio State team comes in 13-5 and is 5-2 in the Big Ten, like or whatever. So
yeah,
he's you can look at me and you are both kind of out on Ohio State right now, and Painter's like, I'm trying to tell them, and one of the players mentioned it too, but like they're only a few possessions away from looking pretty good.
Fair.
So, Kraig, I know you had something that you wanted to bring to Joe.
Yeah. So, did you guys bring up the fact that the scoring originally said that Ohio State was up by 3, and then Braden forced that quick 3 right after it before he figured out they were only up by 2?
We talked around it, and maybe you said it, Braggs, and my listening comprehension isn't great. I did not know.
They changed the score like twice.
I know they changed the score.
To my recollection on the broadcast, and now I have to go back because I thought it said on the broadcast that it was a 4-point game, and then they took the point away and
made it. They counted it as a 3 originally, and it was a 4 or what was it?
Right.
No, I don't know.
I thought
it bounced
when
around.
When he made the 3 that they called it a 4-point game, but then later after Braden forced that 3, they said his foot was on the line, so it was actually a 3-point game. Because to your point, when Braden shot the 3, I thought he was trying to get it to a 1-point game, and then later I was like, oh, he actually was shooting that to tie it. But I don't know if Braden actually knew that or not.
I don't know. Like, so in here in the arena, it had already switched. The score had switched by the time he dribbled into the 3 and took the shot. Like it switched as he was dribbling down the court in the arena, but like he's past like where you would look up and check the score. You know what I mean? At that point, I don't think there's any way he takes that shot at that, because there was still a minute 40 left or something like that at that point. I don't remember exactly, but I don't think there's any way he forces that 3 right there in that moment if it's a 3-point game.
Well, regardless, not knowing it is important. If he knocks down the 3 and all of a sudden they take the point off and you're tied, you're like, great,
right.
But it does help to know what the situation is. Then when you change it after the fact, that does change the complexion of everything. I mean, we talked about this, so we can relitigate it a little bit here, but we talked about it at the start of the program. Those last 2 minutes were just a complete circus, from the amount of TV reviews that they had, booth reviews, whatever you want to call them. And Robbie Hummel was complaining about this, saying like not every single thing needs to be reviewed. When Braden Smith, knocked that ball out in the corner. On the broadcast, they only had one angle, and that was from press row, the one camera shot they had on it. They didn't have like a baseline view of it from a camera perspective. And so when the refs were reviewing it for like 10 minutes, they finally asked Robbie and Noah Eagle if they could look at their monitor.
Yeah, we saw that.
Then they showed them the one view they had, which was a terrible view of it. And so then they finally said, well, it's not enough to overturn Ohio State's ball. Fine, I ain't got a problem with that, but it takes 10 minutes. Ohio State ends up turning it over anyway. The amount of different reviews they had at the end. Then you get to the final 10 seconds, Kraig, where you talk about the score changing twice, the TV reviews. Then you get to the final 10 seconds where now you're getting into a situational moment, and Purdue has 2 fouls to give. I thought Purdue kind of messed up there where they let 5 seconds tick off the clock at one point to get the foul. That was a big moment. And then I'm picking nits here, but if we're just going to try to break down the very end of this game, personally, I didn't think they had to force the miss with 2.9 seconds left. I'd have ran it back one more time, had them make the free throw, and see if Ohio State could either inbound the ball because they've already turned it over twice on inbounds, or make them knock down their free throw. So I wasn't in love with the decision for the forced miss right there.
Yeah, there was 29 seconds left only when the scoring thing happened, but still, you're playing the free throw game at that point, right? Like, you need to make a shot and play the free throw game or whatever, and if it's a 4-point game, chances of them missing 2, whatever, not great, whatever. So 70-67, you can take a quick 2 foul, and you've got 24 seconds to work on them missing a free throw and then you getting a 2. So I really did think that was Braden wasn't in there, so nobody got to ask him if he actually knew what the score was or not. Painter said, well, it stinks, but like we got to relay what the score is so everybody knows, or you got to know, yada, yada. But they can't go back and do it over, but I thought that was kind of just a bad break in the game in general. Somebody else said, Joe, I don't think Isaiah's watching right now, but somebody else said when Braden misses the free throw, he doesn't, because he doesn't hit the rim or whatever, that's a dead ball turnover, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It has to hit the rim.
Right. That the inbounder then shouldn't have been allowed to move on the baseline, and he moved. So that should have been a turnover on Ohio State.
Yeah, Isaiah, we'll have to tweet him.
Isaiah didn't say it. So I saw somebody else say it. I was like, I need to ask Isaiah that question.
My immediate gut reaction, which could be completely wrong, is that would be then a turnover.
Well, and then the one that I didn't understand is, so then after that long TV review where they deem it Ohio State's ball and then they turn it over anyway, where it looked like Purdue was about to get an underneath the hoop layup, but then they call it a turnover because the inbounder was jumping. He wasn't actually moving. He just jumped a little. And so I didn't think Robbie Hummel said the same thing, that he thought he had allowance in his area, that he can't slide, so that whole thing was a mess. At one point, somebody brings it up that they had to review the clock because the clock changed or ran off like 2.5 seconds at the end when there was like 6 seconds left.
It was. I have the play-by-play up. I can try to find the exact. Okay, so like a minute and 2 seconds left. TKR, I think it was like he gets that hook shot to go, right? Cuts the lead to 1. Clock, once it hits 1 minute left with 2 in the second half, it is supposed to stop. Clock did not stop, which then took it to Ohio State inbounded at 54 seconds instead of should have been 1 minute. That's what I think what they're referencing. Again, these are all little things that at the end of the day, Purdue shouldn't have even been a part of, but they are that is 6 seconds that wasn't there.
Yeah.
This is the first game all year, win or loss, though, where I was just like, man, this officiating feels like it's not breaking our way. It seemed like all the bad breaks were going our way.
And then at one point there was a big moment where it was a 50-50 if they're going to call it Purdue or Ohio State, and it was down in the corner by the Purdue family section. They called it Ohio State's ball. Fine, not going to fight it. but it was just like one of those where he had to make a decision there. He chose Ohio State. I think they were up like 5 at that point or something. And then the final play of the game, well, maybe not the final, but then after Purdue, at the end with like 2.9 seconds after Braden Smith forces to miss it. It's a turnover. They go to inbounds the ball and Braden gets ran over, and you could have called that a charge. I mean, it could have been called a charge. It doesn't get called. Fine. I don't have an issue with it. Between Fletcher, always drawing those and everything else, you're not going to give that in that moment. I can understand that. But at the same time, it certainly could have gotten called, and it didn't. Ultimately, last 2 minutes, just a complete circus. But Purdue did everything they could to try to make it a game at the end. So I also kind of got to give them a little credit for doing everything they were down 8, right, Kraig, with like 2 minutes ago.
Yeah.
They could have just gave up, and they didn't. They tried to do everything they could, and credit to Ohio State for knocking down some free throws.
Yeah, and if there's a positive to take away is that Purdue figured out with certain lineups that they can heat people up with pressure if they need to. Because really haven't seen that this year yet. I don't remember. And, man, some of those other – it feels like most of our losses were like too big at the point in time to really be doing that at the end of those games. Maybe Marquette, I guess they could have, or Texas A&M, but
A&M's the one.
Yeah.
That's another situational thing. When they were pressing, they had gotten it down to 3 points with about a minute to go. And then on that inbounds, once they got it to 3, they stopped pressing. I would have kept pressing. They had them in that point. Like, really playing with a nervous tension to get it across half court. And they got, swing of momentum there. And then when they inbounded it down 3, I was expecting them to continue pressing, and they didn't. They pulled it back. So that was another thing there. If I was there, I would have told Matt Painter, hey, let's just keep pressing. But, he doesn't.
You should have.
Yeah, well, maybe I'll bring it up to him on Friday, see what he thinks. But, hey, they did they did everything they could. It wasn't a great game. Obviously it was a disappointing loss. And that's just kind of how it goes in the Big Ten. As you said, Kraig, on Twitter, every team has these kind of losses. You hope they don't come, but they are inevitable when it comes to Big Ten play. Now we're just going to have to see which ones Michigan State finds a way to lose here as we get down the stretch.
Well, and over again coming into this January stretch, right? Joe and I kind of said you get through January with 2 losses, you're in good shape, right? And feel pretty good about things. Just still got 2 games left to go. One of them against a really, really competitive Michigan team. But they're still in position. Didn't expect it to come to this team, but they're still in position to do good things.
They're still in this. It puts a lot more pressure on the Friday game, just in terms of obviously that's a big game in general.
Yeah.
And not that it affects the game actually, but in terms of, affording a loss, quote unquote, winning this allows you to lose against Michigan and you're okay. But now you look at the next 4 games: home against Michigan, home against IU, at Iowa, home against USC. And then you have 3 games of Michigan, Wisconsin, Michigan State, 2 of those on the road. You probably want to, if you want to win the Big Ten, you got to win the next 4. Yeah, if you want to control your own destiny down the stretch, you got to win the next 4. You can lose one and still have a chance, but you're needing more help the rest of the way. If you win the next 4, probably you have to assume Michigan State will probably drop one soon. Also, their last 7 games, 6 of their last 7 are brutal, so their losses might come late. You win, you beat Michigan, and you're back to kind of controlling your destiny in terms of still of a Big Ten title, in my opinion.
That's right. Salty B says all Purdue can do is move forward and learn from this one. If Purdue can get the win against Michigan, we'll forget this ugly one. 100%. I'm right there with you. Boilermaker for Life is joining us from the Twitter side of things. Appreciate you. And says, let's go Boilers. And Mad says, always comes in here and says, oh, wow, every time. It's very consistent, and that's why we love Mad says. And then Jeff Nestor adds, Braggs is right, and we should just take a screenshot of this and save it forever because that will never happen again. I don't know if you guys got anything left. I know you guys it's been a long night for you guys at Mackey. Once again, I ducked the Mackey Arena smoke. I didn't make the trip out in the negative 20-degree weather to watch our beloved Boilers lose to Ohio State, and you know how much I want to get there. So I will be there on Friday by hook or by crook. I know you guys don't believe me at this point, but I will be there. I swear to God. I'm chomping at the bit now, and I'm sick of talking about the Chicago Bears, but they pay me to talk about the Chicago Bears, as stupid as that sounds. So I don't know if you guys got anything left. I know you guys want to hit the road, but as always, appreciate you, Kraig Bowers and Joe Jackson, for all your hard work with your coverage. Make sure you're following those guys on Twitter. Make sure you stay tuned for their preview to the Michigan matchup here coming up. I know these guys are going to be previewing that here very soon. And and thank you to everybody that's tuned in here all night long. Please hit that like button on your way out. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already. If you're watching on Facebook, if you're watching on Twitter, we appreciate you guys so much. But following us on YouTube is certainly one way to help support what we do here and help grow what we're trying to do and help find us to other Boilermaker fans that may not be aware of the work we do. So we'll be back Friday night, all of us at Mackey Arena. I swear, or I am buying dinner for you two. So this is a dinner bet that I will be there on Friday. And Olivia Schmeltz says, what if there's snow? If there's snow, I am not coming. But there's not going to be snow. Don't put that evil on me, Olivia. I will not drive on 65 in the snow. You know this. Don't even put that out there, man. But that's it. That is my Midwestern goodbye. Thank you to everyone for tuning in once again. Appreciate you guys. Boilers lose to Ohio State. Let's keep your head up. Boilers will be back here Friday night against Michigan, so we'll catch you then. Stay warm, ladies and gentlemen.